I am glad to welcome you to my channel Sinister Horror Stories. Before we start the story, I would like to ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Jenny had never been afraid of being alone. At 22, she prided herself on being independent, living in a small but cozy house just outside the city limits. It was the kind of place where the nearest neighbor was a good quarter-mile down the road, and the nights were so quiet you could hear the creak of the floorboards settling as if the house were sighing in its sleep. It was a Saturday night in late October, the kind of night where the air carried a chill that settled deep into your bones. The trees had long since shed their leaves, leaving their skeletal branches to tap against the windows like bony fingers. Jenny had plans to curl up with a book, a glass of wine, and the soothing sounds of a storm rolling in. The forecast had promised rain, but what she got was a sudden, violent downpour that hammered against the roof and windows, drowning out all other sounds. She loved storms, the way they washed the world clean and made everything smell fresh afterward. But tonight there was something different about the storm, something that put her on edge. She tried to brush it off, blaming her nerves on the horror novel she'd been reading. The protagonist was trapped in a house much like hers, stalked by an unseen presence. It was nothing, she told herself, just a story, fiction. But as the night wore on, the unease grew. She was halfway through her second glass of wine when the power went out. One moment she was bathed in the soft glow of the lamp beside her, the next she was plunged into darkness so complete it felt like being submerged in ink. Setting her glass down carefully, she fumbled for her phone, using the screen's dim light to find her way to the kitchen where she kept a flashlight in the drawer by the sink. She clicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The familiar surroundings of her kitchen looked strange, distorted in the flashlight's glare. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw something, someone, move out of the corner of her eye. She whipped the flashlight around, but there was nothing there. Just shadows playing tricks on her mind. Get a grip, Jenny. She took a deep breath and decided to head upstairs. The circuit breaker was in the basement, but the idea of going down there into the cold, damp dark made her stomach turn. She'd wait out the storm in her bedroom, where she could wrap herself in blankets and pretend everything was normal. She made her way up the stairs, each creak of the old wood sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. At the top of the stairs, she paused, feeling that same prickling sensation on the back of her neck. She turned slowly, shining the flashlight behind her, down the stairs she'd just climbed. The beam illuminated nothing but an empty hallway. The storm, the power outage, the darkness, they were all playing tricks on her. That was all. But then she heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible rustling sound, like fabric brushing against wood. It was coming from her bedroom. Jenny froze, the logical part of her brain to take control. It's the wind, she thought, the curtains moving, or maybe a branch tapping against the window. But deep down, she knew it wasn't the wind. She slowly approached her bedroom door, the flashlight held out in front of her like a shield. The door was ajar, just a sliver of darkness beyond it. The rustling stopped, replaced by a silence so profound it made her ears ring. With a shaking hand, she pushed the door open the rest of the way. The room was empty, her bed neatly made, the curtains still, nothing out of place. Jenny let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She crossed the room and set the flashlight on her nightstand. The beam pointed at the ceiling, casting a dim light around the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady her nerves. That's when she noticed it. Her closet door was open. She always kept it closed. Her heart began to in her chest. She stared at the door, willing it to stay still, to not move. She wanted to tell herself that she must have left it open earlier, but she knew she hadn't. She stood, every muscle in her body tense, and walked to the closet. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door. She hesitated for a moment, then yanked it open. The closet was empty. Jenny let out a shaky laugh, relief flooding through her. She was letting her imagination get the best of her. There was nothing to be afraid of. Just shadows and old houses making noise in the night. She turned back to the bed, ready to crawl under the covers and wait for morning. But the bed was no longer empty. A figure sat on the edge, its back to her, hunched over as if in pain. The dim light from the flashlight caught the edges of its form. A man, his clothes tattered and wet, his skin pale and slick as if he'd just crawled out of a grave. Jenny's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. All she could do was stare as the figure slowly turned its head towards her. Its eyes were empty sockets, black as the void, and its mouth stretched into a grotesque smile. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Jenny felt the room spin, her vision narrowing to a tunnel. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the figure reaching out to her, its bony fingers brushing her skin. They found her the next morning curled up on the floor beside the bed, eyes wide open, staring into nothing. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication of a struggle. The house was as quiet as ever, but Jenny never spoke again. All she could do was rock back and forth, mumbling to herself, her eyes locked on the closet door, which she would never allow to be closed. Thank you for listening to the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Share your impressions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.